A man stumbled upon a shocking discovery in the Arctic: a multitude of frozen monkeys, all miraculously still alive. The stakes were high. If even one of them had escaped, it would have spelled disaster for the humans on site. At the Arctic Bioresearch Station known as Arctech Biosystems Research Facility, located above the 83rd parallel, scientists conduct experiments with a highly dangerous virus. Suddenly, tragedy strikes as a catastrophic accident claims the lives of the entire team, except for a virologist named Peter. But Peter's fate takes a dark turn as the virus infects him, setting the stage for an impending crisis. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, an epidemiologist named Dr. Alan Farragut, unaware of the events in the Arctic, prepares for a routine presentation. He's aided by Dr. Sarah Jordan, who harbors a secret affection for him and supports him in every way possible. Alan's world is turned upside down when he receives an urgent message from the Arctic station. A military officer named Sergio Ballesteros requests Alan's assistance in assembling a team to combat the outbreak. The team includes Alan, his ex-wife Dr. Julia Walker, Dr. Doreen Boyle, Sarah, and Major Sergio. The leadership of Ilaria Corporation insists that Julia must be part of the team, though she remains unaware of the pivotal role she'll play. Alan's personal connection to the crisis becomes evident as the infected Peter is his own brother. Tensions rise as the team boards a plane for the Arctic, and unresolved conflicts between Alan and Julia surface. Their divorce, triggered by Julia's affair with Peter, still casts a shadow over them. Upon arriving at the station, they are greeted by director Dr. Hiroshi Hatake and his adopted son, Chief of Security Daniel. The situation is dire. Peter is critically ill, and the other 146 base workers are free roaming without adhering to quarantine measures. Hiroshi believes the infection isn't airborne, but the helicopter has departed, leaving the scientists stranded beyond the Arctic Circle with no escape. They are given access keys to all doors. As they examine Peter's condition, they discover a mysterious black liquid coursing through his veins. Shockingly, Peter, with unnatural strength, attacks Alan, seemingly intent on transmitting the strange fluid. A sedative from Julia temporarily subdues him, leaving the team bewildered about the nature of the virus. Doreen begins investigating the source of the infection, suspecting the monkeys used in experiments may be responsible. However, Daniel denies the presence of monkeys on the station. Doreen's suspicions are confirmed when monkey fur is discovered. The team examines Peter's deceased colleagues, transformed into a black liquid by the virus, a phenomenon beyond scientific understanding. Alan presses Hiroshi for answers but receives no clear information. As they uncover Peter's last video recording, he provides little insight but signals them to run. Simultaneously, they realize Peter has escaped, leaving them with the unsettling realization that an infected individual is lurking in the ventilation system. Gas is pumped through the ducts to neutralize Peter and prevent further infection. Alan, driven by his personal connection, ventures into the ventilation system to find his brother. Meanwhile, Doreen and Sergio discover empty monkey cages, suggesting that the monkeys have gone feral and escaped, except for one which attacks Doreen but is sedated by Sergio. Fortunately, Doreen escapes unharmed from the attack. Alan encounters an immobile man missing a hand in the ventilation system, unmistakably the work of Peter. During the examination of materials from the infected individuals, Julia identifies an unknown virus that defies scientific understanding, transforming cells in unprecedented ways. At the same time, Sergio secretly assembles a data transmission station and sends information to his superiors without the team's knowledge. He discovers frozen monkeys who attempted to flee. He returns to the base and hints to Hiroshi that he has relayed information to their superiors. Clearly, these men share a common secret. Peter, using a guard's hand, infiltrates one of the laboratories and attacks several local scientists, transmitting the black liquid. The 3 victims who survived the attack managed to escape and are now potential sources of infection. Those infected but not escaped are quarantined. The following morning, Doreen studies a monkey when one of the infected approaches. The distressed individual doesn't attack Doreen but experiences hallucinations. The second infected man is apprehended in the corridor and taken to quarantine. The remaining station personnel are horrified by these events and demand evacuation. However, evacuation is not an option because if any potentially infected individuals leave the station, it could trigger a global epidemic of an unknown virus. Sarah tends to the infected individuals in isolation. One of them is in excruciating pain and requires morphine. In the storage area, Peter nearly attacks Sarah. He is also here for morphine because he is experiencing intense pain. Peter has no intention of infecting Sarah, he only seeks Julia. Meanwhile, Julia learns what Peter had been working on in recent days. It turns out he had been conducting experiments on animals with new, unknown virus variants called Narvik A and Narvik B. Julia intends to replicate these experiments to understand what happened to Peter. An infected scientist informs Doreen that the base had been working on a drug meant to alter human genes. She then goes berserk, attempting to cough the black liquid into Doreen's mouth. However, Doreen manages to subdue her. Julia and Hiroshi conduct experiments on rats with mysterious viruses. After testing Narvik A, which proves deadly, they move on to Narvik B. In this case, everyone survives but becomes zombie-like and can spread the infection to others. However, a small percentage eventually regains some normality if treated. The world had never seen a virus that made carriers so aggressively dangerous. The infected individuals in isolation demand to be released and even take Sarah hostage. Alan arrives for negotiations and promises that a vaccine will be ready soon to cure them. To prove his sincerity, he removes his protective suit. One of the healthy scientists from the station wants to escape to reveal the truth about the horrifying experiments to the world. However, Sergio intercepts him and forces him to remain silent. The secret bosses wouldn't approve of information leaks. An infuriated Alan wants to know why his brother was working on the most horrifying and unknown virus on Earth. But Hiroshi provides no explanation, merely stating that Peter's experiments with Narvik were his own initiative. Alan doesn't believe him. In the evening, Hiroshi lovingly looks at a photo album of Julia and then sits down at a microscope, removing his lenses. In reality, Hiroshi has bright silver eyes, unlike any human. Julia is taking a shower when Peter suddenly appears and forces her to ingest the black liquid against her will. Julia loses consciousness. In the morning, Alan finds Julia in the shower. She remembers her encounter with Peter as if it had occurred in a dream, so she doesn't inform Alan about the infection. Later, in the lab, Alan encounters Peter, who pleads for help and then loses consciousness. The number of infected individuals in isolation increases, but some of the more unruly ones roam freely. Alan brings his brother to the ICU, and Hiroshi fears that Peter might escape again. It's decided to move the infected to the lower, more secure level of the building. The entire floor will serve as the new isolation ward. Julia gazes at herself in the mirror, experiencing hallucinations of her body starting to mutate after being infected. However, these are merely illusions. To identify all the infected individuals, Sarah and Julia work on a rapid response test to detect the virus. During their work, Julia notices that Sarah's hand trembles severely. Julia suspects this might be a symptom of Narvik infection and regards Sarah with suspicion. Doreen wants to continue his research on the monkey that likely infected Peter after the Narvik B injection. However, the animal has been stolen. Sergio, though, knows where to find another infected monkey. He leads Doreen to the spot on the street where the monkeys froze. Doreen suspects Sergio found this place not during a casual stroll. Sergio confesses that he came here when he transmitted data to the Pentagon, as there are people who believe Hiroshi is deliberately infecting people. Sarah manages to create a rapid response test. Test tubes with biomaterial from the infected turn green, while those with biomaterial from the healthy remain clear. Julia discreetly conducts the test on herself and, to her surprise, turns out to be healthy. Meanwhile, Doreen adds growth hormone to infected cells, causing them to proliferate at an astonishing rate. Sergio asks Doreen not to reveal the experiment to Alan. Alan accidentally learns that there is a cure for the virus called Sidra. Hiroshi confesses that he developed Sidra, a universal remedy for all diseases, but after recovery from the virus, 75% of the subjects face a fatal outcome. Therefore, Sidra is an imperfect and dangerous solution. Scientists request all base personnel to take the test and send the infected to the lower level for isolation. At Julia's insistence, Sarah also takes the test and is found healthy. However, a third of the station personnel fall ill. One of the infected becomes excessively aggressive and kills a colleague. Panic ensues as people gather in the hallway. Suddenly, the most dangerous infected person appears and rushes towards Julia. Alan eliminates her, but it was in vain, as Julia has still been infected. She has to remain on the lower level. Sarah cannot control the trembling in her hand and takes some pills. She is indeed seriously ill, but not due to Narvik. She has terminal cancer, which she keeps secret. Julia double-checks the result of her test. Her test tube remains clear despite her infection. This indicates that the test is ineffective, and people are being isolated based on the wrong principle. Julia attempts to inform Alan, but Sergio detonates the satellite antenna, cutting off communication. Julia attempts to make her way upstairs, but her efforts prove futile. In the morning, the people in isolation become desperate. They want to disable the air filtration system throughout the building to force Hiroshi to release them upstairs. Julia opposes this, and as a result, she is placed in the corridor. After the antenna explosion, communication with the outside world becomes impossible. Now, there will be no assistance, and the infected individuals face a grim fate. Sergio did everything to prevent anyone from learning about the horrors at the station. However, few realize that he is the actual traitor. As desperation mounts, the infected disable the air filtration system, leaving everyone with 6 hours to survive. Hiroshi goes to negotiate with the infected. Scientists continue working on the vaccine, but so far, without success. Alan visits Peter, who is in a deteriorating condition. He tries to save his brother using Sidra, despite the grim prognosis after its application. Fortunately, Peter actually starts feeling better. On the lower level, an aggressive infected individual attempts to attack Julia. She is saved by someone in a spacesuit. The rescuer is named Jane and is uninfected. Sarah encounters a woman displaying virus symptoms who tests negative. This makes Sarah realize that the test is flawed. She informs Alan and begins refining the test. Alan personally talks to Peter, who has regained consciousness and the ability to communicate verbally. However, Peter doesn't provide any coherent information about his research. On the station, he conducted mundane work, and Hiroshi constantly questioned him about Julia. Soon, the virus returns to Peter's body. He apologizes for involving Julia and stops breathing. Alan artificially sustains his life. Julia and Jane explore the lower level and discover Julia's initials, which she had written as a child. It seems she had been there before. Hiroshi arrives for negotiations with the infected who had disabled the air filtration system. He convinces the people to turn it back on, but then unexpectedly turns violent against them. Afterward, he goes to search for Julia, and even the most aggressive infected individuals avoid him. Doreen continues his research and discovers that the virus acts as a transporter for some unknown substance into the genes. This substance is unknown to science, but it's clear that it can fundamentally alter a person from the inside. Armed with this information, Sergio attacks Doreen and stages the scene as if a shelf with rats had simply fallen on her. Then Sergio eliminates all the monkeys using fire. When the animals thaw, they start coming back to life, but the fire consumes them. Sergio then informs the higher-ups that he's ready for evacuation from the station. However, he is asked to find and evacuate a certain Dr. Havid. Alan finds Doreen in a distraught state and suspects Daniel's involvement in her condition. The head of security reviews video footage from the laboratory where Doreen worked and spots Sergio. Hiroshi intentionally injures himself on the lower level, then seeks Julia's help. She agrees to escort him through the tunnel to the operating room. Alan investigates Doreen's situation and realizes her injuries were not accidental but inflicted intentionally. Sergio remains uncooperative and only fuels the suspicion. He hints to Alan that Dr. Havid holds the answers to all their questions. The military officer simply wants to locate this elusive Dr. Havid and leave the station as soon as possible. Sarah's health deteriorates, leading her to turn to morphine for relief. During Alan's visit, she makes an attempt to kiss him, but Alan quickly realizes that she's under the influence and firmly encourages her to rest and recover. In the tunnel, Hiroshi, Julia, and Jane are attacked by virus carriers. All but Jane manage to hide in a secure room. Hiroshi shares a heartfelt story about his daughter, who resembled Julia. She doesn't yet comprehend the significance of these conversations. Alan confronts Daniel and accuses him of what happened to Doreen. However, Daniel suggests they take a closer look at Sergio. The two men inspect Sergio's room and discover all about his misdeeds. They also learn that Sergio is searching for Havid for evacuation. Daniel rushes outside and retrieves the upper part of Havid from the snow. Sergio arrives as well, strikes Daniel, and takes the container with Havid. Julia and Hiroshi reach the observation room, where she tends to Hiroshi's wound. It becomes apparent that Jane was a hallucination caused by the virus. Sergio is about to leave when suddenly Daniel confronts him, strips him of his clothes, and leaves him to freeze in the snow. Daniel retrieves Havid and returns to the base. Alan, heartbroken, prepares to disconnect his brother from the ventilator when suddenly Peter's brain begins functioning. During the night, someone rescues the frozen Sergio from the snow. Julia's hallucinations worsen due to the virus's progression in her body. She sees a young girl on the lower level, possibly her childhood self. Then, she hallucinates Peter, who hints that Julia needs to uncover many secrets. Julia's hallucinations intensify as she begins to mutate, cared for by Hiroshi. He injects some substance to the woman, and she falls asleep. Then he leaves the lower floor through a secret door. Sergio regains consciousness in the house of an Eskimo woman named Anana. He is handcuffed, and the girl has no intention of freeing him. First, she needs all the information about the station and the abducted children. Alan continues his research and realizes that the Narvik B virus delivers some genetic information. Under Alan's pressure, Hiroshi has to confess that Narvik doesn't harm but cures any disease, even cancer. The virus just hasn't been perfected yet. Daniel confesses to Hiroshi that he got rid of Sergio. The director becomes furious because if Sergio doesn't make contact, their superiors will come to the base. Then things will get tough for everyone. Julia regains consciousness as if in her childhood home in Montana. Alan and Sarah repeat Darren's experiment with accelerating the growth of the virus cells and are also horrified by the results. Alan freezes the grown branches, and they wither. This way, the scientists realize that the virus doesn't survive in the cold and decide to cool Peter in a cryochamber. Sergio tries to escape from Anana. The girl goes wild and shows the officer photos of children from her village abducted by Hiroshi 30 years ago. Sergio still manages to free himself, sees Daniel outside, and attacks him. Anana screams that it's not Daniel but her brother Talyuk. It turns out that Talyuk has a twin brother named Mixo, whom Hiroshi kidnapped in childhood. So, Daniel's real name is Mixo, and he is the same abducted boy from the Eskimo village, not Hiroshi's son. Julia's hallucinations reach the point where all her friends and Hiroshi are sitting at the table in the house where she grew up. All of this drives the woman insane, and answers to the surrounding mysteries do not seem to appear. With the help of Peter's cryogenics, they cool him down to 14 degrees. It seems to actually work in curing the virus. Alan and Sarah draw closer in joy. Daniel and Hiroshi try to find Sergio, but instead, helicopters with Hiroshi's superiors fly to the station. They are representatives of a Ilaria corporation. Meanwhile, Julia regains consciousness. Her eyes become silvery, just like Hiroshi's. You will learn about the rest of the mysteries of the series Helix very soon in the second part of our recap. And what do you think? Will there ever be a virus in the world that turns people into controlled zombies? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.